Let's start with a really simple question. What do you think about Scrum?
Uh, so I've been working in Scrum for more than 8 years right now, and as you said, I'm the PSPO III, which is one of the probably 400 right now
Hmm?
professional product owners worldwide. So I invested a lot of time in the framework, and I still think a lot of ideas are valuable, and
Yeah.
it's a great tool to um, deliver value for the customers and for the business. But my approach to Scrum has evolved in the recent years, and I started noticing that there are some lacks, some ideas that are missing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I know that many people say that Scrum is purposely incomplete, but for me, it's
Hmm.
like a car without the engine or some important part, and
Hmm.
without delivering it, it is not something optional. Those are not
Hmm.
elements that you can add or you might not. And if you
Hmm.
want to work in product and treat your work seriously, there are some elements, some obvious elements that are just missing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there will be a lot of criticism today, but like at the very beginning, I would say, or I'd like to say that I really think Scrum is a good idea, and like it was a big leap from
Mhm.
from how we developed software previously. But still, like there will be a lot of points which we, in the next half hour will discuss and say, okay, this is missing and that is missing. But still, like if you go into product management, you should actually know Scrum, and it's really valuable to know Scrum, how it works. And I think most of people work with Scrum out there, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's worth to know it and worth to use it in most cases.
Yeah, yeah.
At the same time, you mentioned product, and I get the impression that Scrum is, of course, it uses the word product and it defines product as a vehicle to deliver value. But in fact, it can be used. What is product in Scrum? It might be interpreted as a project. Uh, and any other kind of work, which is like working in a customer vendor relationship. This is
Mm.
not necessarily product, as we know product from the product management. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why some elements are missing
Okay.
that are necessary in the product world, but they are not necessary in other
Yeah,
areas.
yeah, yeah. So we did set up this LinkedIn Live based on a post of you, right? Where you had a list of 7 items, and you can see the 7 items here in the description, which you think are missing in the Scrum framework, right? So now we'll just say, like, let's go step by step through the list, right? And just, have a chat about the different aspect which you think
Mm-hmm.
are missing there. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll just start with, product vision. Is that like, okay, we should point one at a product vision.
Mm-hmm.
Are the points, like in that consecutive row most important? So is product vision the most important point, or was it just, a list of 7 items?
It's the most generic one, and I think we can discuss them in this order, but it doesn't mean that this is the most important point.
Okay, so what do you mean by product vision, and why do you think this is crucial?
Uh, so pro-
Mm.
so product vision, it's it's something that you need to lead people and to make them work towards the common goal. And it's not enough to define what are you trying to achieve, but also you need to define why you are trying to achieve it. And it's better to have to give people some compelling reason why
Mm.
what they are doing is important, why they should get up every day and go to work, and how they will be motivated by what they are trying to achieve. And of course, you can stay on the goal level, and the product goal was added to the Scrum
Mm.
framework
The
quite
latest
recently.
version. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, but goal is like something for me. Goal is can be expressed as, for example, increasing customer engagement or reducing the churn rate, but
Mm.
without some long-term vision, without some emotional aspect of
Mm.
why it is important and why we are trying to do it and where we will go in the long term. Um, I think it's not enough, and you cannot simply lead people just by setting goals that you expect them to achieve.
Mm.
So I would say that the product vision gives the purpose, and so this is the why we are doing this work and
Purpose
at all. Yeah.
But I think you think on company level, right? So that's the vision you're talking about, or is this vision really like a team vision, a Scrum team vision, or like on which level would you say, okay, we actually need that?
I think at every level, and that's a good question. But you can have a vision for the whole company. You can have a vision for some department that is responsible for the group of products, and also you might have a vision, and you should have a vision for your product that gives the purpose and sets the long-term direction specifically for your team. Why the work that your team is doing is important and how it will contribute to the larger organization vision.
Yeah. So basically on all levels, you say it can be on all levels. I think for the company, it's really wise to have it on a company-wide level, because I remember when I was back in my studies, I read a case study and it said, the companies who really can express a vision are the more successful ones. And I think, especially the young generation is also, looking at which company they really want to work based on their vision and what impact they have on the world and how they treat people and stuff like that, and the environment and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's extremely important. People don't go to work just to get the money. They want to contribute to something meaningful. And it's hard to be motivated just by achieving someone's goals when you don't see any meaning in it, in doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is not at all mentioned in the Scrum framework, right? Like all points are. Is it?
No, it's not, and I really don't understand why. Because I understand that Scrum. I would understand the argument that Scrum defines only the necessary elements, but how can someone argue that vision is something optional? It is not. Those are the basics, and at least it should be mentioned that the product goal is related to the vision, and it might be part of the product backlog. The vision also gives, together with the next point, maybe we
strategy. Let's go to the strategy.
So this is what in the Netflix culture is referred to as a strategic context. That instead of giving people just tasks or giving people even goals, you give them all the information they need to make better decisions. And part of this information is not only a vision, but also the strategy. So how will you create value for the customers? What do we do differently, and what we don't do? So the trade-offs that so the choices that you make, and every time you make a choice, you choose something, but then you have to reject some other option. And this is extremely important for the strategy. What types of customers do we want to serve? What are their jobs? What are their pains?
Exactly. And I mean, all this stuff basically also defines like what is the next increment you do, the next feature, the next product, right? So deciding on which target segment you want to focus, what you want to deliver, that's like giving a lot of guidance, right?
Yeah. So let's say so it's required for the team, for the product manager, for the designers to make better decisions every day. And if you just give them the goal, like reduce the churn rate or increase customer engagement, without that context, they may achieve this goal, but they will compromise the strategy. They will compromise being unique and standing out from the crowd. So I believe this is needed, and this should be explicitly communicated to the team. And you need strategy on the company level. So what companies do and what company doesn't do, what are the trade-offs, which market do we choose, and what we are trying to achieve, why we are playing on that field. But I think we also need a strategy on the product level, on the team level, maybe if there are some other layers, so you can have a strategy on the department levels, and all those strategies should be correlated. So the lower level strategy refers to the strategy defined on a higher level.
Let's see. Do you think a company can live without those two things? Or do you think they're simply not, is it optional or is it a must have? And I think, what do you think? Let's say in Germany, we have a word, it's called the Lackmus test. So let's check, like at your current role, do you think they expressed a product vision and a product strategy?
So you started with the question if the company can live without strategy and without the vision.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I think it cannot, because if you have no strategy, it means that you are trying to grab every opportunity that you have, and you are trying to satisfy every customer in every market, in every possible job that you can think of. And so there is nothing unique about what you are doing. And then you can only compete by adding more features than your competitors and lowering the price.
Well, but actually, I would argue that there are a lot of companies out there which do those 2 points really poorly. And over long run, I think they will, the performance will go down, but you can sustain sometimes without doing that really in a good manner or good, excellent, right?
Yeah, if you formulate it like this, I think most of the companies do not have a clear strategy, but they are not doing great.
Exceptionally well, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Next point, product discovery. Now it gets really interesting.
Yeah, that's the for me that's the most interesting one, because I believe the main focus for the product manager especially should be on discovering what to build. And if we
one second, you said the main focus of the product manager should be on product discovery.
On discovering what to build, not on delivering things, because delivering things is it's not managing the risk. And for me, product management is in heart, it's risk management. So you need to make sure that the solutions work for the customers, work for the business, that customers know how to use it, that it can be done from the technical point of view, and also that what you are doing is ethical.
That's really one point I was, wondering where, like the 4 risks, you have 5 risks. Typically it's just the 4 risks, like viability, feasibility, but you added ethics. Where does, what's behind that?
That's not my idea. I first read about it in, I think it Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres. Yeah. But also Marty Kagan mentioned it recently. So we would like to make sure that not only customers desire what we are creating for them, so this can be called value, but also that it won't make any harm to the environment, and also it won't harm the users. Because not always what people desire is good for them. And there are we know that in some apps like Instagram or maybe Facebook, some people say about toxic usage patterns. So we would like to be responsible and make sure that what we are doing serves people instead of hurting them.
Yeah. And I think our society shifted a lot in the last 20 years, right? I remember in the 90s where shareholder value was the only thing you were, running after. So give back as much as you can give to your shareholder. And now we look at a much broader view on the world, right? Environment and what's the impact? Do we good for the people? Do we leave a better planet after behind us, right? All right. Product discovery. Okay. And now we have
sorry, Thomas, but I need to add for product discovery. It's too important for me that
yes,
that in Scrum, we assume that, or in Agile in general, we assume that somehow product manager or product owner gets the ideas. Those ideas, so product owner in Scrum manages the product backlog. Those ideas are placed in the backlog, and then we implement them, and we learn that when we deliver them, we learn that those are not great ideas, and most of them do not work. So it's extremely important to validate ideas before selecting them for the implementation, before we even start developing the code, because this is the most expensive way to learn. Delivering production-ready increments just to find out that this doesn't solve any problem, this is wasteful. This causes a lot of rework. So instead of developing the ideas, the random ideas, it's important to work together as a team to discover what to build and to tackle the risks by experimenting, and only then selecting them for the implementation, adding them, for example, to the product backlog and selecting for the sprint.
And I think that's the secret of agility. So, like many people think when they think agile, they think Scrum. And I think what you just said makes you so much more agile, because it depends on what you give to your developers, right? That's typically the bottleneck. And you want to filter out beforehand in the discovery phase what you actually will deliver value, right? So it's kind of a filter what you give to your engineers, right? And for me,
it's all about maximizing value, and the only feedback loop, the only learning loop that is in Scrum is learning by delivering. So we deliver something,
exactly.
we create increment, we show it to. This is another point. We present it to the stakeholders. We have this workshop, and they say, "Yeah, it's worked great, or it doesn't work. Make something different." But the work is already done. So
exactly.
So the cost of this learning, this is the maximum cost. Someone can say that this is limited to the length of the sprint, but it happens every sprint, and every sprint, most of the ideas do not work. So in the long term, it's a lot of waste.
It's the Bob the Builder mentality. Yeah, let's build it and see if it works, right? Okay. Point 4 to 7. I think, like build, measure, learn, or release, measure, learn, how you called it, is that related to the product discovery? Also, like experiments, is it also related to product discovery, or do you see it as a different, point? When I was reading the list, I thought, okay, point 3, 5, 4, 5, and 6. I know 4 and 5 at least could be like also in the product discovery. So it's like a subtask, or how do you
I think we have covered point 5, which is having experiments in the product backlog. It's some of the possibility how we can combine Scrum with product discovery. But point 4 is about something different. Is about that. Instead of trusting stakeholders' opinions, and of course we have this sprint review after every sprint, and then this is a workshop. This is not a demo or a presentation, and you may have customers as stakeholders, but still they are expressing opinions. They are not using the software for real, and opinions are biased. And so I would like to shift the focus, instead of learning from opinions, just releasing the product. Giving it to the people, and then measuring it, working with the data, working with the product analytics, to have a validated learning, not learning that is based on opinions. Opinions are biased. So this is not good enough. And I have seen many Scrum teams that were presenting working increments every sprint, and the stakeholders expressed their opinions, but the release happened like after half of the year. And after the release, you may find out that even though people said this is great, when they start using it for real, the outcomes are different than you expect. So you really need to release and test as soon as possible, give it to early adopters, and then learnings from people using your product for real.
And adapt accordingly, right? So the real power is if you adapt your existing stuff and develop it further based on the feedback. it's also like that's taken a bit from the startup world, right? Build, measure, learn, lean startup, classical thing. Let's have experiments and then, see what works and, improve based on that. I think I was actually thinking about discovery, startup is permanently in the discovery mode, right? Build, measure, learn, discovery, and also experiments is basically from the startup world. So there's a lot of influence from design thinking and lean startup, isn't it?
Yeah, the whole lean is about eliminating waste. This is what Eric Rice promoted with the MVP prototype. So doing the minimum work that is required to get maximum validated learning with minimal effort. So this is the initial discovery, what we are talking about, sometime before we have a product market fit or even before we release anything. And this is for the startups in this pre-market fit phase. And after you release the software, the product, focus on software mainly. After you release the product, you can start measuring and working with the data. And before, all you have are experiments and talking to the people to get their opinions. But this should be talking to the customers and running some experiments with prototypes.
Do you think it would be wise to have a feature market fit as an expression?
Feature market fits?
Because, like in the startup world, you apply it to a whole business model, right? But we also have like features, which are, basically a feature is an experiment, right? Because we don't know what will actually happen, right? And that's why you will say, okay, we need a learn loop, we need to measure, right? And that's like, it's just, copy paste from the startup world to a existing product, and just we can apply the same. I think we can apply the same principles to features.
I think you can have, I use it a little bit differently. So usually when you are building a company and let's say you are a startup and you hit the product market fit, this is the product market fit for a specific customer segment. This is not a universal product market fit. And after you achieve the product market fit in one customer segment for the specific customer jobs and problems, then you can focus on another market and extend your product. So in that sense, you might have the MVP for this market, even though the product is already on production. But for this new market, then you might test a set of features or a feature that you need. But
cool. All right.
But in general, I'm not using the term.
Just
market set.
I was just wondering whether this would be smart, because, like, I also think, like we can adapt a lot of stuff from the startup world to the product management and basically, like discovery, build, measure, learn, experiments you think in the same direction, whether the term and the wording is the same or not, it, doesn't actually matter. So where are we in our list? Let's see. I think point 5, we talked a little bit about it. Do you want to add something on the experiments?
No, I think we have covered it with product discovery. And so the only problem I see is that according to the Scrum guides, the product backlog is the only source of work for the Scrum team. And of course, product discovery work is a different type of work, but it also should be done not only by the product manager, but also by the designer, by engineers. So we do it together. And for example, Teresa Torres calls it the product trio. And if you do not have experiments directly stated as a separate type of product backlog item, you might expect that delivering this experiment will produce some increment of value. And of course, this is not the case because the only goal of having experiment is proving or disproving assumption. You don't have any increment of value. So just to make the
I
Scrum
would
guide.
actually, I disagree here actually, because, like learning by itself is value, right? It is incremental value. It's just not incremental value you can touch or you can click on, right? But it's huge value. Actually, like when I work with entrepreneurship teams, learning is the only value I look at the very beginning. And I think we need to embrace the idea that learning is actually value. If we learn that a feature is not working with our target group, that's huge, because then we don't need to produce something.
Yeah, I agree, but all I'm saying is just this is another type of value, and it's not so easy to apply definition of done to it or release it. It's also not a concrete stepping stone toward the product goal. This is it's valuable, but it doesn't fit the other parts of the Scrum guides nicely if you have experiments. So
you're now finding for the Scrum guide. Come on. That was really interesting. Like I think we could make just an episode about that, because I think learning is really valuable. Especially.
I agree. That's why I would like to have it a special experiment in there as a separate type of product backlog items.
Yeah. So next point. Let's see that. I'm really curious about that. Information and evidence when Scrum is effective. What do you mean? Sure. What do we need there?
Sure. So I would expect that. So it's like the first version of the Scrum guide is 2010, right?
The first version, yeah.
2010. So it's 13. It's been 13 years, and a lot of product managers, a lot of agile coaches talk about making data-driven decisions and about being scientists when we work with products and creating value. But if we look what people say about Scrum and the opinions that are exchanged, those are all personal opinions. Some personal stories that something worked for that person and didn't work for another, and some case reports. So I have not seen any objective case studies, like taking two groups and then random groups and then running experiments.
I like that.
And most of the surveys, and there are some surveys that you can find, but it's like questioning people that are interested in Scrum or are connected to some Scrum community or Agile community, what they think about something. And this is highly biased. This is unscientific. And so with this data-driven approach, I would like to start treating it as more seriously. So having a list of hypotheses directly stated in the Scrum guides, having some references to the case studies that were performed, some randomized control trials that we can verify and see when it was effective and when it didn't work, in which conditions. And the only advice that you can get from the Scrum guide is just to try it and see if it works for you. And this is trying it is not so easy, and most even experienced teams fail to implement Scrum. So I would really like to see some data.
Interesting. Well, I mean,
why? Yeah.
Basically, you suggest like doing a big retro perspective, over Scrum itself, right? So to iterate it. And I actually would say like you do it right now, right? So you did it for yourself, right? Because you look at Scrum and say, okay, what could I actually do better? But you would actually like to have that scientifically proven, right?
Yeah, because it's not one product and one team. We have thousands or hundreds of thousands of the teams that are using Scrum for many years, and extracting some data and drawing conclusion. I think we can do much better than just asking people about their opinions. And those opinions are biased, of course, because people, we are questioning people that are interested in Scrum, that are using Scrum on a daily basis. Some of them has invested a lot of money and a lot of time in working with the framework. So how can they be objective? It's difficult.
Yeah, interesting. So update or verify that our work, our processes, and what we do with Scrum works and keeps improving. Remove immutability. What do you mean by that? Because to be honest, with every development, we change a product. So a product is never immutable. I think you mean more with that taking features out of the product again, right? Or what is it?
No, it's an immutability of the Scrum framework. So the Scrum Guide states that the Scrum Guide is immutable. Scrum, as defined in the Scrum Guide, is immutable. So you cannot remove elements or change elements that are part of the framework. Actually, you can do it, but the official argument would be that this is not a Scrum anymore. And at the same time, you make the Scrum Master accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. So they really don't have a choice. You define those positions as a Scrum protector, and they need to protect Scrum as it is defined in the Scrum Guide. So for me, it doesn't really matter if the result is Scrum or not. If it brings value to the team, and
exactly,
they can remove something else, change the rules. So
in that sense, it's good that it's not everything is defined. Like with Discovery, you can do whatever you want because it's not defined, right? Yeah. All right. So, but like Scrum is a framework, right? So what is the term framework? I mean, these are 7 artifacts. You say like, okay, this is really missing in Scrum. Yeah. Do you think Scrum would be better if we integrate it and describe it, how to do that stuff? Or, it's like intentionally left incomplete, right? So
I wouldn't describe it in detail, but I would just mention how to combine it. Vision and strategy, those are not things that you can intentionally leave. It's something that should be referenced. Those are very basics for any empowered team that is supposed to make decisions and solve problems. So this should be referenced. When it comes to product discovery, we are missing the feedback loop, a very important feedback loop, the learning, but not learning by delivering, but learning by experimenting. And this is, it's hard to say. It's purposely incomplete. And if it is purposely incomplete, maybe it's not intelligently incomplete. I think right now it's just something that any product team has to do. And also, you can do Scrum and do not release your product at all. So you may do Scrum and present your product every 2 weeks, for example, and then release after 2 years. And for me, it's not intelligently incomplete that you do not release and do not measure, do not work with the data. It's just missing. It doesn't feel good. And of course, you don't have to define how exactly it should be done by mentioning that there is a feedback loop that you learn from people using your product. This seems important.
I'm totally with you. I did a joke when I wrote under your post. So I have a new product framework. It's build better products, and it's left intentionally incomplete. So just figure it out yourself, whatever you want to do. So, okay, we run a little bit over the half an hour already. So guys, just paste your questions into the comments, and I know here is like 1.5 minutes time gap. So start typing now, whatever question you have to Pawel, and we will answer them. And let me just, take the 1 or 2 minutes. We'll have a gap here and say some words about the product masterclass, right? Because we built the product masterclass because everybody else of us was a career changer. And at the beginning, everybody struggles, I think, in product management. And we struggle because it's super complex, right? And typically the answer to, okay, let's get more education, is many people start with Scrum, but it's only one, artifact. And I think, all the stuff we talked through right now, are missing. And, at the discovery, I got really passionate because for me, for example, I'm really passionate about the discovery part, but we also have a designer and we have a product guy and we have a software developer. So we help people, from 4 perspectives over the course of 8 weeks on the job, right? We give them video input, they make some exercises, and then we review it in a call with them and help them to learn what product management out there really means, how people really live it. So if you want to get better in product management, check it out on the product management, productmasterclass.com, and we'll see. All right, let's see which questions we have here, which came up. Ulf, how do you see the role of a PO versus PM if both exist in an organization? What do you mean? PO, PM? What's the difference for you?
For me, there is no difference, and this is a common misunderstanding. I know many organizations implement it like this, but even the Scrum framework defines the product owner as a decision maker. So then they are not proxy, they are not order takers, but they are responsible for creating, maximizing value and making sure that what we are doing works for the business too. And if product owner and product manager are separated, it typically involves that product manager talks to the customers, talks to the business, and product owner is just a person managing the backlog. It also separates product manager from engineers, and for me, this collaboration because product management is an intersection between business, customers, and technology. And if you are a product manager that cannot talk to the technical people directly, but has some proxy, it cannot work well. So for me, this is a one person, and it shouldn't be splitted.
Yeah, like Sebastian, my co-founder of the Product Masterclass, he has a really passionate opinion about that. He says, it's the same role, just Scrum defines it as product owner, and you actually do the same as a product manager. That would be his answer, and he's really passionate about that. But I know, in reality out there, it's all over the place. Hardware products called product owner, and product managers are responsible for. It's really every company uses it differently, isn't it?
It happens that some companies has the split, but the product owner from Scrum, it's not intended to be a job, to be a position in the company. It's just an accountability, and this accountability, it should be fulfilled by a person that is managing the product. But I know in many companies it's not the case.
Yeah. Sebastian is asking how to justify learning efforts to stakeholders used to classic delivery. So how do you argue, let's rephrase it. How do you argue to make a product discovery when you've been in a really, engineering and delivery focused company?
So it depends if whether the customers of this organization are satisfied and how many times in the past they had to change the requirements. So I would look how many waste and rework they already had, and I would propose let's try to do things differently and see how it works. Because if you work in a, let's say, customer vendor project, and you just you send the invoice based on the hours you work. So maybe the customer expects you to work and don't think about if it creates value. But if you're in a product organization, it's just doing anything that we think might work. It will create waste, it will create value, it will create sad customers that are not satisfied, and you should be able to identify that.
Yeah. I think it's just a faster way to learn, right? And you should be able to argue that with your with your boss or with your company. Yeah, I agree with you.
You need to find the problem and show that it is a problem for this company. And if it is not, maybe you should continue, but it shouldn't be the case. But if it's not the problem and every idea you have works and customers are delighted and you're better than your competitors, then maybe you don't need to change anything. I have not seen that example yet.
And I also think it's actually quite easy to argue that you should do something like that, because every company has a lot of features which are not used by the customer, right? So there is always like a graveyard or a lot of failures, and you can ask, you can really, go with that and say, okay, are we sure to build that thing, right? And then you ask for the success criteria before you build it, and then you will figure out, okay, so sometimes we are just missing the market, right? Okay, here, Pablo asks, what are the ideal participants for a product strategy workshop? Who must be, who should be, product trio or complete product team? What do you think about that? Product strategy workshop.
Product strategy workshop. So I'm not sure. I think you cannot define the strategies. Just start and complete your strategy during one workshop. It would be difficult. So you typically start with the vision, and the vision is not something that you can easily define just during the one meeting. You can start with something simple, but it typically evolves and it changes after you define your other elements of the strategy. And part of the strategy is market and defining customer jobs. So this can be done by the product trio, so engineers, designer, product manager working together, interviewing customers, talking to people. You can use jobs to be done, or just get some qualitative data and, for example, use the Olsen's formula to measure the importance and the satisfaction. And part of the strategy is that you need to define the market, so jobs and needs, and cluster customers by those jobs and those needs. Then you need, so it's in large part related to product discovery, because you also need to define the value proposition, which is what you will do and what you will offer to solve the problems. And of course, it cannot be done without experimenting, without proposing solutions, without testing those solutions. Also, you might have, as part of your strategy, some assumptions related to how you will grow. So, for example, if product-led growth is the right approach, and you can also try to formulate experiments and run those experiments to prove or disprove your growth model. So there is a lot of market research, some benchmarking, talking to customers, running surveys, iterating many times, running experiments, and only after some time you might have the strategy, but the strategy will still evolve. And it will.
How about marketing? How about marketing and sales? Especially in early organizations, small organizations, it's often sales driven. What do you think involving about marketing sales?
So it's part of the product discovery that you need to make sure that you are trying to do works for different parts of the business. And of course, marketing is important part of the business. Sales is important part of the business, because you need to ensure that this unique value proposition that you are going, or you just have defined, that it will work for the sales, that we have required sales channels, that it's a good time to market it. So for me, this is a part of product discovery, and of course, other departments should be involved. Also, financial department, when we define our business model, to make sure that, for example, the product might be profitable in 5 years, but you need to, especially in a small company on a startup, you need money. You don't need the promise of money or some simulation that you will earn money in 5 years. And this should also be taken into account when planning how you win on your market.
I think a lot of product managers don't have the full picture, and you only have that if you really look into the financials as well, right? So that really leads to some illogical work you do. Here's another question from Sebastian, my co-founder here. He says, like, what kind of format would you propose for a, let's say, did the feature actually work review? Like we talked about earlier, that the feature is shipped and most people don't care about it anymore. So in your experience, which format did you use to really, follow up with the success of the feature?
So you always create a feature to achieve some outcome. So you don't create the feature to create a feature.
Yeah.
So, for example, you have this goal to reduce churn, and then you think about customer problems related to this business outcome that you are trying to achieve, and then ideas how to solve that problems in a way that will drive your outcome. And of course, you can measure the outcome. That if this was churn, you can measure the churn, but it will not be it's not a direct measurement because many things might have influenced it. The exact metric that you will use for the feature depends on the type of the product that you are doing. So I recently use a lot customer satisfaction score. So how satisfied are customers, and I measure it before releasing the feature. For example, if there was an old version of the feature, or if they have used another solution, so how satisfied they were with this feature and how important is it for them. And I measure the same after the release. Another way to measure it is the customer effort score. When, for example, after completing an order, you can ask customer how easy it was from 1 to 5. And the easier it is, it means that the effort for the customer is lower, so the perceived value of the feature. If you have two features with the objective value the same, but the one is 3 times easier to use, so this which is easier to use is the perceived value will be higher.
Yeah. Well, like this is like you talked a lot about KPIs, right? So how do I actually measure if I get better, right? So Sebastian here in the comments, for example, says bugs, measure bugs, right? You said, okay, usage, like you can measure a lot, but is there also, like, did you have a meeting or a sharing opportunity, or did you have like something, to sit together with your colleagues to review a feature or what you built to, think through it and understand whether you made progress or not? Like more the format, not the KPIs.
No, I don't have any specific format. I usually use tools like Pendo just to get product analytics. Okay. And before releasing a feature, before releasing some functionality, we just define the feature, the metrics and the KPIs that make sense in this particular case, like customer effort score or customer satisfaction score or the feature usage. And the problem with metrics is that they can tell you what customers are doing. So, for example, that they are using or not using the feature, but they do not answer the why. So if you see that from the metric that from Pendo, let's say that customers are not using the feature, it doesn't answer the question why. Maybe they don't know how to use it. And to get the why, you need to contact those people and talk to them or send them the survey. But it's qualitative again.
Yeah. I think the best results you always get if you combine qualitative and quantitative The one says you if they do it, and the other why. So it's always like the why you mostly don't get out of the number, right? The why is always the harder question to answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we have Manyu. I hope I spoke the name correctly. Okay, so it's a little bit a longer question. Scrum Guy says that the team should deliver a usable increment every sprint, but your view is that a lot of experiments should happen as part of product discovery. What do you think about that? I get that the term of learning from product discovery, you will know what not to build, but then how do you deliver value every sprint? And, like just to add on this question, I mean, somebody mentioned Jeff Patton, dual track Scrum here in the comments. I think Jeff Patton is great. Review that, look into that. Also, like user story mapping from him is really valuable. Okay. So what would you say? Like, would you answer that? So, discovery is not really building
how
something.
You deliver value every sprint, and you do the discovery in parallel. So it's not that you start with discovery, and after finishing discovery, you start delivering things, but you do it in parallel. So, and also Jeff Patton and Marty Kagan also mentioned it as they refer to it as dual track agile or dual track Scrum. Yeah. Which is having those two streams that run in parallel, and the goal of product discovery is discovering what to build, and the product delivery, which I see as Scrum, is delivering it. Of course, you also learn from this delivery. Yeah, but they are not separated, so it's not like in project management where you do the analysis up front and then you start delivering it. That's not the idea.
Yeah, I think, as I said beforehand, I think the learning is an increment as well. All right, Pawel, that was really good. I loved it. Yeah, I think it's, like really well thought through. You have really clear opinions about the different things, and maybe we should just rewrite the Scrum Guide. What do you think?
That would be interesting. I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah.
Well, like at least it's not the thickest book, it's just 17 pages. So we could add some pages there, isn't it?
Yeah, we can remove more than we add.
So we keep it condensed, the same length, cross something out, put something in. Yeah. Interesting. What's the most important part? Like we talked a lot right now, over 1 hour. What's the most important thing? What would you give? Like if you could change one thing, what would it be?
I think it would be removing immutability, so that you can just take Scrum and experiment with it, and you don't have to be afraid that the result will not be Scrum. And that's the goal of the Scrum Master, is to help and support others.
Interesting.
Be productive and create value, not follow the Scrum. And right now, Scrum Master is responsible for establishing Scrum as in the Scrum Guide. So
interesting. I would have never guessed that you take that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I would rather have a set of principles and values and patterns that anyone can use, but not a rigid framework. So that would be the most important one.
But actually, you can do that, right? I mean, Scrum is anyway, open source, right?
You can do that. Yeah, but people are told that
the framework itself will change, right? That's what you're saying. Like we will have a huge impact if the framework itself would change, right?
It's not official that you cannot change Scrum. In theory, you can, but the Scrum Masters are responsible for keeping it like it is described. So they may or may not decide to experiment, but this is causing a lot of confusion. And I don't see people willing to. So it's in most cases it's perceived as something bad that our Scrum, it's not Scrum from the Scrum guide. It's a negative. But it shouldn't be. Why? Maybe you have the better framework. Maybe your process here is more productive. So
yeah.
So the common reaction is the first thing the first thought is that we are doing something wrong because we are not following the rules.
Yeah, but like all the 7 points you just mentioned and you wrote down, they're all changing Scrum or add something. Most of these points are adding something, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not really taking away; it's more adding something to Scrum, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my point is just to encourage people to experiment and see what works for them, and do not obsess over some rules, because the most important thing is that what they do works for them, works for the business, works for the customers, that it creates value.
Perfect. I think that's the most important. I think that's a beautiful last sentence. I just saw that somebody asked whether this will be available afterwards. Yes, it is on LinkedIn. You still can comment. You can share it with your coworker. Pawel, thank you very much. That was really super good. Loved
Thank
it.
you. Yeah. Thank you. That was a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. So have a good evening. Was great. We'll see you on LinkedIn anyway, because you're super active there. So just follow him. You can also follow the Product Masterclass. We also sometimes post, and we always give you a thumbs up, Pawel. So see you. Bye-bye.